neighborhood stopped growing. Before you drift any deeper, if this quiet helps you feel safe tonight, you are welcome to stay with us. Nothing here needs urgency. Subscribing softly keeps this place gentle and allows these nights to continue in their own slow way. Now rest. What follows is not an introduction meant to awaken curiosity. It is meant to lower it. This is a beginning that does not push forward. It settles. Morning does not arrive loudly in this part of the city. It never learned how. There is no signal that something important is about to happen. Light simply appears where it always has. It slides across stone that has already memorized its shape. Walls do not react. They do not brighten with pride. They accept the warmth the way tired bodies do. Without comment, without gratitude. This neighborhood of Rome does not greet the day. It allows it. Around the year we now call 270, the city is still alive. That matters. It is not abandoned. It is not broken open and left to weather. People still live here. They wake, they eat, they argue mildly, they sleep again. What has changed is not life itself, but direction. This part of Rome no longer expects to become something else. There are no new streets planned, no new blocks outlined in chalk, no sense that tomorrow requires more space than today. Expansion has quietly exited the conversation. The absence of growth does not feel dramatic. That is the first thing worth noticing. Nothing collapses to announce it. No ceremony marks the moment ambition fades. The neighborhood does not mourn the future. It simply stops talking about it. Once that happens, life becomes oddly efficient. People stop preparing for what they might become and start managing what they already are. The city breathes more slowly. It wastes less energy pretending. Homes remain exactly where they have been for generations. They do not move aside for anything new. They lean closer together in places where repairs have tightened the gaps. Walls show their age openly. Cracks are not hidden. They are not beautiful either. They are tolerated. A tolerated crack becomes background. Background details are where this neighborhood now lives. Inside these buildings, space has been negotiated down to the essential. Rooms have been divided again and again until no one remembers the original layout. Families adapt without discussion. Children learn early how to exist without distance. Privacy becomes a skill rather than an assumption. Voices travel through walls with ease. Everyone knows more about everyone else than they would admit. The city holds these intimacies without judgment. It has learned that closeness is not always chosen, but it can still function. The streets outside feel narrower than they once did, not because they have changed, but because expectations have. Stone pavements are worn smooth by centuries of movement that no longer happens at the same scale. There are fewer carts, fewer deliveries from distant places. The ground remembers a busier time even if the present does not reenact it. Walking here feels like stepping into a conversation that has already said everything important. People move through these streets with purpose but not haste. There is nowhere urgent to arrive. Shops open when they always have. Not earlier, not later. The baker prepares bread that tastes exactly like it did yesterday. No one complains. Surprise has become unnecessary. Familiar flavor is enough. Enough has become a comforting word, even if no one says it aloud. Money changes hands calmly. There is no excitement attached to it. Prices do not fluctuate wildly because no one needs them to. Trade exists to maintain routine rather than chase opportunity. The idea of growth through commerce has softened into maintenance through exchange. People buy what they need and stop. excess creates complications. Complications require planning. Planning implies belief in a future that needs improvement. This neighborhood no longer insists on that belief. By mid-morning, the rhythm of the place is fully settled. What you hear is not activity but continuity. Footsteps, doors, a voice calling a name it has called every day for years. The city does not amplify these sounds. It absorbs them. Sound here does not echo with ambition. It simply confirms presence. This is a living neighborhood that has stopped expanding and discovered something quietly useful in doing so. Without the pressure to grow, it becomes stable. Stability is not exciting. It does not produce monuments or legends. It produces days that resemble one another closely enough to blur. For those inside it, this blur is not failure. It is relief. No one stands in the street to reflect on this condition. Reflection would suggest dissatisfaction. People here are not dissatisfied enough to reflect. They have adjusted their expectations downward until the present fits comfortably. The city still breathes. It still holds bodies. It still feeds them. It simply no longer promises more. This opening moment is not meant to lead anywhere. It is meant to stay where it is. A neighborhood that does not grow does not invite anticipation. It invites acceptance. And acceptance is quieter than hope. If this quiet helps you feel steady tonight, you are welcome to remain here a little longer. Nothing in this place will ask you to move forward. Subscribing softly keeps this calm intact and lets these long nights continue without interruption. Now rest. A morning that did not promise anything. Morning arrived the way it had learned to arrive in this neighborhood, without confidence and without ceremony. Light did not rush. It did not announce itself. It slipped between buildings that stood too close together to allow any drama. Stone absorbed the brightness slowly, as if it had already seen this before many times and felt no need to react. Nothing here responded with surprise. Morning was not an event, it was a condition. The streets were already awake before anyone admitted it. Not because people were moving quickly, but because the city itself never fully slept. Walls held warmth from the day before. Corners kept the memory of footsteps. Even in stillness, the place remained occupied by its own past. When light appeared, it revealed nothing new. It simply confirmed what was already there. Houses pressed against one another with the familiarity of long coexistence. No space remained unused. No empty lot waited for improvement. The idea of a new building felt unnecessary here. Construction would imply intention. Intention would require explanation. No one was interested in explaining why more was needed. The absence of scaffolding was not temporary, it was settled. The city had agreed with itself that expansion was no longer part of the schedule. People woke inside these buildings quietly. There was no signal to rise, no bell, no shared rhythm imposed from above. Bodies responded to habit rather than instruction. Eyes opened because they always had at roughly this moment, not because the day demanded it. Habit proved more reliable than motivation. Motivation fluctuates, habit stays. Windows opened without enthusiasm, doors followed. Wood creaked in familiar ways. No one paused to listen. The sound belonged here. It did not interrupt anything. The neighborhood accepted these noises the way a body accepts its own breathing. Necessary, unremarkable, impossible, to avoid and not worth resisting. The morning light revealed faces that did not expect transformation. There was no sense of beginning again, no belief that yesterday had been resolved overnight. The day was not new. It was continuous. It carried forward unfinished thoughts without apology. People did not mind. They had learned to live with incompletion. Movement began slowly. A woman stepped into the street carrying a broom worn thin by years of repetition. She swept, not to improve the street but to maintain it. Dirt here was not symbolic, it was practical. Remove enough to function and stop. Perfection would have been suspicious. The street did not need to be clean, it needed to be passable. Nearby, someone opened a small shop. The same motion performed each morning, the same latch lifted, the same pause before committing to the day. This pause mattered more than any declaration. It was the moment when one decided to continue. Continuation did not require enthusiasm, only consent. There was no rush to prepare for something larger. No crowd gathered to witness the day begin. Each person handled their portion of the morning privately, even while surrounded by others. Individual routines overlapped without coordination. The city did not orchestrate them. It allowed them to coexist. The absence of construction noise was noticeable only because it had been absent for so long that silence became its own background sound. No hammering, no shouting instructions, no dust rising from ambition. The city had stopped altering its shape and learned how to live inside it instead. Buildings were not waiting to become something else. They were complete enough. As people moved through the streets, their pace suggested familiarity rather than purpose. They walked where they always walked, turned where they always turned. The neighborhood did not offer choices. It offered routes. Roots reduce uncertainty. Uncertainty demands attention. Attention was being conserved. Children appeared briefly and disappeared again into doorways. There was no clear start to their day either. Play emerged between obligations. It was not scheduled, it was permitted. No one expected these moments to develop into anything memorable. That expectation had been lowered long ago. The morning air carried the scent of food being prepared in predictable ways. Bread baked as it always had. No new flavors were attempted. Innovation requires optimism. Optimism had become optional here. Familiarity was preferred. Familiarity reduced disappointment. People greeted one another without conversation, a nod, a glance, recognition without exchange. Words were not necessary to confirm presence. Everyone already knew who belonged where. The city had memorized its inhabitants. There was no need to restate the list. Time passed without being measured. No one checked whether they were ahead or behind. There was no schedule large enough to compare against. The morning unfolded according to internal rhythms rather than external demands. This made it feel longer, even though nothing extra happened. What might have once been considered stagnation now felt like stability. The city had learned that stability did not require progress. It required consistency. Consistency demanded less effort. Effort was being rationed. As the morning continued, the street settled into a steady pattern. Doors opened and stayed open. People moved in and out. Nothing accumulated. Nothing escalated. The city maintained a careful balance between activity and rest. Too much of either would draw attention. Attention was unnecessary. There was a quiet irony in this calm. Rome had once defined itself by expansion, by roads pushing outward, by buildings rising to prove something. Here in this neighborhood that history lingered only in stone. The present did not attempt to compete with it. Competing with the past is exhausting. Letting it remain is easier. The morning did not ask for interpretation. It did not suggest meaning. It simply existed. For those living inside it, this was enough. They did not wake hoping for transformation. They woke expecting continuity. Continuity met them without resistance. By the time the sun climbed higher, the neighborhood had fully accepted the day without marking its arrival. There was no sense of having begun, only the awareness that one was already inside it. This was how mornings worked now, not as beginnings but as confirmations. The city had learned something subtle and useful. A day does not need to be different to be lived. It only needs to continue. Rooms that learn to stay, housing inside a city that stopped expanding. The houses in this neighborhood do not announce themselves. They do not rise with confidence or present clean edges meant to impress anyone passing by. They remain where they have been for a long time and behave accordingly. Walls are close, windows are small. Light enters carefully, as if aware it is not the main focus. These buildings were not designed to host ambition anymore. They exist to contain life at a manageable scale. Most of these homes are not single-family dwellings in the way stories prefer. They are layered structures where space has been divided repeatedly until no one remembers the original plan. What once may have been a larger room is now two smaller ones separated by a wall that feels slightly improvised. That wall is not new. It has simply never felt official. It exists because it works. In a city that no longer expands, usefulness has replaced intention. People live stacked above and beside one another in arrangements that require cooperation rather than consent. Insulae and small houses share boundaries so closely that the distinction between one home and the next becomes more theoretical than physical. Floors creak in recognizable patterns. A footstep above means someone is awake. Silence below means someone has gone out. The building itself carries this information effortlessly. Privacy has adjusted its definition. Inside these homes, space is no longer imagined as something that might increase. There is no anticipation of an extra room appearing someday. Furniture is arranged with restraint. Objects that remain do so because they have proven themselves necessary. There is little tolerance for items that exist only to suggest comfort. Comfort is practical here. A place to sit, a place to sleep, a surface that can be cleaned without discussion. Rooms are reused throughout the day without apology. A space that holds sleeping bodies at night becomes a working area by morning. No one calls this inconvenient. It is simply how the house behaves now. Walls have learned to witness different activities without reacting. They do not judge the transition from rest to labor. They support both quietly. Families live closer together in ways that require adaptation rather than agreement. Distance is not available, so patience fills the gap. Children learn early how to exist without isolation. They understand the sound of others breathing nearby as normal. Silence is not expected. Complete solitude would feel strange. The house teaches this lesson without words. The closeness produces friction, but also familiarity. Arguments happen quickly and end quickly because there is nowhere to retreat. Disagreements lose intensity when they cannot travel far. The walls absorb raised voices and release them dulled. The building helps regulate emotion simply by refusing to amplify it. This is architecture as mediator. Repairs are frequent but modest, a beam reinforced, a patch applied to stone that has already accepted many patches. No one expects permanence. The goal is endurance. A house that lasts through the season is considered successful. Longer timelines feel unrealistic. This is not pessimism, it is calibration. Light moves through these rooms unevenly. Some spaces receive it generously. Others live in a permanent half-shadow. People adapt their habits accordingly. Certain tasks belong to certain corners. No one complains about this arrangement. Complaining would suggest the possibility of change. Change is not scheduled. The irony is subtle but present. Rome once built outward and upward to demonstrate strength. Here, strength has been redefined as the ability to remain functional without adding anything. These houses are not symbols. They are containers. They do not impress visitors. They support residents. This feels sufficient. Walls hold marks from previous generations that no one bothers to erase: scratches, discoloration, the faint outline of something that once leaned there. These traces are not curated. They remain because removing them would require effort with no clear benefit. The past stays visible not because it is honored, but because it is convenient. There is a quiet humor in how seriously these buildings take their role. They no longer pretend to be part of a grand vision. They know exactly what is expected of them and nothing more. Shelter, containment, continuity. They perform these tasks reliably without drama. At night, the houses draw inward. Doors close early. Light retreats to small pockets. The closeness that felt busy during the day becomes protective. The building holds its occupants tightly and releases less sound to the street. This is not fear. It is habit. The house knows when to quiet itself. Living like this reshapes expectations without anyone noticing. People stop imagining future expansions of space and begin negotiating present arrangements more carefully. Furniture placement becomes a form of planning. Shared surfaces become agreements. The house encourages cooperation simply by limiting options. These homes do not inspire stories of greatness. They inspire stories of persistence. They remain standing because enough people continue to live inside them without demanding more. In a city that has stopped expanding, this becomes a quiet achievement. Nothing about these houses feels temporary, and nothing about them feels complete. They exist in a state of continued adjustment that is proven sustainable. The walls do not move, but the lives inside them shift constantly. The structure allows this without complaint. In this neighborhood, housing has stopped trying to be impressive and learned how to be sufficient. That lesson stays with anyone who lives here long enough. Space does not need to grow to hold a life. It only needs to stay. Walls that remembered everything. Repair inside a city that refused to grow. The houses that learned to stay also learned something else quietly and without instruction. They learned how to be repaired instead of replaced. In this neighborhood, repair is not a temporary phase. It is the primary condition. Nothing waits to be torn down. Nothing is scheduled to become something better. The wall in front of you is not an obstacle to progress. It is progress now. Repair happens slowly and often without announcement. A stone is adjusted. A crack is filled just enough to stop widening. No one tries to make the surface perfect again. Perfection would attract attention. Attention would raise expectations. Expectations would eventually demand change. The city has learned to avoid this entire sequence by settling for adequacy. A repaired wall does not try to hide its history. It carries seams and mismatched textures openly. The repair does not erase the crack so much as interrupt it. The crack remains visible enough to be recognized later. This is useful. A familiar crack can be monitored, an invisible one cannot. In a city that no longer expands, visibility becomes a form of safety. People living inside these houses recognize the cracks the way they recognize neighbors. They notice when one looks slightly longer. They feel it with their fingers when passing by in low light. The wall becomes a record of time rather than a failure of construction. This familiarity produces a strange calm. If the wall has not fallen yet, it probably will not today. There is mild humor in how much information these walls hold. They know when families argued loudly. They know when a room was repurposed. They remember furniture that no longer exists and voices that no longer live here. The wall does not react to any of this. It simply accumulates. Compared to the people inside it, the wall appears patient and remarkably discreet. Repairs are done with materials already available. Nothing exotic arrives. No one sends for distant stone. The idea of importing improvement feels excessive. What is nearby is sufficient. Mortar is mixed by hand. Stones are reused. Wood is patched. The goal is not restoration. The goal is continuation. This approach affects how people think about time. A repaired wall suggests that tomorrow does not need to be different to be acceptable. It only needs to be held in place. The city absorbs this message gradually. People stop imagining dramatic changes. They begin focusing on preventing small failures. Preventing collapse becomes more important than achieving novelty. The cracks themselves become part of the interior landscape. Furniture is arranged around them. Light falls into them at certain hours. Children trace them absent-mindedly. No one tells them to stop. The crack belongs here now. Removing it would feel like removing a feature rather than fixing a flaw. In older stories, a crack symbolized decline. Here it symbolizes endurance. A wall that cracks and stays standing proves something quietly impressive. It has absorbed stress and adapted. The city respects this kind of strength more than flawless appearance. Appearance requires energy. Endurance saves it. Repair also changes how people relate to ownership. A house that is constantly being maintained never feels finished. Because it is never finished, it never feels fully owned. Residents become caretakers rather than conquerors of space. This produces a lighter relationship with possessions. Nothing is treated as permanent enough to dominate attention. The rhythm of repair blends into daily life. A patch is applied between meals. A stone is adjusted while someone waits for water to boil. There is no ceremony, no special day assigned to improvement. Improvement has been redefined as preventing deterioration from becoming urgent. Even the sound of repair is subdued, a muted scrape, a soft tap. Nothing announces itself as construction. Construction would suggest a future that needs preparation. Repair suggests a present that deserves preservation. The neighborhood prefers the present. There is also a practical wisdom at work. New buildings require planning and coordination. Repair requires memory. Memory is abundant here. Everyone remembers where the wall failed last time. Everyone remembers which solution worked and which one did not. This shared knowledge reduces discussion. Repair becomes efficient because it relies on familiarity rather than innovation. The wall becomes a shared reference point. People speak of time in relation to it. Before the crack widened, after it was filled again, the wall organizes memory better than calendars ever could. It stands still long enough for human lives to move around it. At night, repaired walls feel heavier. They hold warmth unevenly. Some sections retain heat longer, others cool quickly. People adapt their sleeping positions accordingly. The wall dictates comfort without negotiation. It has earned this authority by remaining upright. There is no embarrassment attached to living among visible repairs. Shame would imply comparison. Comparison would require an alternative. There is none here. The city is no longer competing with anything. It exists in parallel with its own past without trying to surpass it. The humor remains quiet but persistent. A wall that has seen generations come and go has little reason to take current worries seriously. It does not respond when voices rise. It does not lean in to listen. It stays exactly where it is. The people inside eventually learn to do the same. Repair, instead of replacement, teaches restraint. It limits how far problems are allowed to travel. A small crack addressed early does not become a collapse. A city that practices this logic at every level becomes stable without excitement. Stability is not celebrated. It is experienced. As these houses continue to be repaired rather than rebuilt, the neighborhood develops a particular texture. Nothing looks new. Nothing looks abandoned. Everything looks lived with. This in-between state proves durable. It absorbs time without resisting it. In the end, these walls do not tell a story of decline or ambition. They tell a story of adaptation. They remain standing not because they are perfect, but because they are understood. And understanding turns out to be a stronger foundation than novelty ever was. Streets that no longer needed more people, movement inside a finished city. The streets in this neighborhood do not widen to welcome anyone. They do not prepare for crowds that never arrive. They remain narrow, worn, and certain of their limits. Stone has been pressed smooth by centuries of use, not by recent activity, but by long habit. These streets remember when they were busier. They simply no longer feel obligated to repeat it. Walking here requires attention, though not urgency. Space is shared without discussion. Two people passing each other adjust instinctively. A shoulder turns slightly, a step slows. The street teaches cooperation without instruction. It does not provide enough room for indifference. At the same time, it does not punish presence. Everyone fits because everyone already knows how. The stones underfoot carry familiar patterns. Certain sections dip slightly where weight has passed repeatedly for generations. Feet learn these dips early. A local walks differently from a visitor without thinking about it. The street has shaped the body over time. No sign announces this. The lesson arrives through repetition. There are no new streets branching outward. No hidden shortcuts leading to fresh districts. Every path has been walked enough to lose its mystery. Getting lost here is difficult, not because the streets are well marked, but because they are known. Knowledge replaces signage. Memory replaces discovery. The neighborhood has become legible in the way a long-used room becomes legible even in low light. Sound moves carefully through these streets. It does not echo dramatically. The narrowness softens it. Voices blend rather than bounce. A footstep announces presence without demanding attention. Noise here is informative rather than disruptive. It tells you someone is nearby. It does not insist you react. This creates a particular sense of safety. Not the kind based on control, but the kind based on predictability. You hear life around you just enough to know you are not alone. Silence never becomes absolute. Crowds never overwhelm. The street holds sound at a manageable level. It regulates social distance better than rules ever could. Merchants place their goods close to doorways without blocking passage. The street does not tolerate excess display. There is simply no room. Items are arranged with restraint, not out of modesty but out of necessity. The street enforces a kind of quiet discipline. Anything unnecessary becomes an obstacle. People pause often but never linger long. Conversations happen briefly and then dissolve. There is no space to gather large groups comfortably. This keeps interactions light. Arguments struggle to gain momentum. Too many bodies would make them impractical. The street discourages escalation through architecture alone. Children play here in ways that adapt to limitation. Games shrink to fit corners. Movement stays close to walls. Running is brief and careful. The street allows play but reminds it to be considerate. Even joy learns how to keep itself compact. There is a mild irony in how these streets behave. Rome once built roads to extend power outward. These streets now serve the opposite purpose. They contain life rather than projecting it. They keep activity circulating locally. Nothing here pushes toward elsewhere. The street does not lead you to expansion. It leads you back home. Travel through this neighborhood feels circular. You leave and return without noticing the transition. The streets fold movement inward. They do not encourage ambition. They encourage familiarity. Over time, this shapes expectations. People stop looking ahead and begin looking around instead. At certain hours, the street appears almost still, not empty, just settled. A person leans against a wall. Another crosses slowly, carrying something small. The stones accept this weight without response. They have held much more before. There is no need to rush now. The absence of new construction leaves the street uninterrupted. No barriers, no temporary detours. Nothing suggests anticipation of change. The route you take today will be the same tomorrow. This consistency feels heavy at first. Then it becomes comforting. Predictability lowers the need for vigilance. Even at night, the street maintains its character. Light pools unevenly from doorways and small lamps. Darkness fills the rest without drama. Shadows are familiar. Corners do not hide surprises. They hide memory. People move carefully, but not fearfully. The street has earned trust through repetition. There is quiet humor in how seriously these streets take their role. They refuse to be impressive. They do not showcase architecture or inspire admiration. They exist to be used and nothing more. This humility makes them effective. They do not distract from movement. They support it. Footsteps overlap throughout the day. In patterns that repeat so often, they begin to feel like a rhythm. The street does not keep time formally, but it marks it anyway. Morning sounds differ from afternoon sounds. Evening settles differently. No one announces these shifts. The street recognizes them on its own. Living with streets like this changes how people think about presence. Being seen is unavoidable. Being watched is unnecessary. Everyone passes through the same spaces. Familiarity dissolves suspicion. Strangers stand out, not because they are threatening, but because they are new. Newness feels noticeable rather than exciting. The street does not offer anonymity easily. It offers recognition. Faces become known. Gates become identifiable. This discourages excess behavior, not through fear, but through awareness. When everyone knows where you are going, there is little reason to pretend otherwise. Over time, these streets teach a lesson that no one articulates. Growth is not required for movement to continue. Circulation does not depend on expansion. Life can move within boundaries without suffocating. The street proves this daily. By refusing to widen or multiply these streets, have preserved a particular balance, enough activity to feel alive, enough space to function, not enough room to disappear. The city has accepted this balance and stopped negotiating with it. In this neighborhood, the street is not a promise of somewhere else. It is confirmation of where you already are, and that turns out to be enough. Corners that taught memory. How a city learned to move without colliding. After the streets learned how to carry fewer people without complaint, they taught something else quietly and without instruction. They taught memory, not the kind written down or announced, but the kind stored in bodies. In this neighborhood, movement is guided less by signs and more by recall. People do not navigate by looking ahead. They navigate by remembering where they have already been. Children appear first in the corners. They always do. Corners are where the city allows play without disturbance. These spaces are not designed for children. They have simply been claimed by repetition. A corner where nothing important happens becomes a corner where something small is allowed to happen. Children recognize this immediately. They do not need permission. They sense vacancy the way adults sense obligation. Games unfold without expansion. A stone becomes a boundary, a wall becomes a goal. Movement stays contained. Running happens in short bursts and ends before it becomes inconvenient. The street tolerates play as long as play respects its limits. Children learn this balance instinctively. They adjust their bodies to the architecture rather than the other way around. No one corrects them. Correction would suggest danger. There is little danger here. There is only proximity. Children learn early how close is too close. They understand how to pull back before contact becomes collision. This knowledge is physical. It does not come from rules. It comes from watching others do the same thing for years. Adults pass by without interference. They do not supervise actively. They do not intervene unless necessary. The children are not seen as disorder. They are seen as part of the street rhythm, a moving element that fits into the pattern without disrupting it. The city accommodates them because it always has. As children grow older, they carry this knowledge forward. They become adults who avoid collision, not by asserting space, but by yielding it early. This habit becomes visible everywhere. Two people approach one another. Neither claims the center. One shifts slightly without thinking. The other mirrors the movement. No apology is exchanged. None is needed. The street continues unbroken. Avoidance here is not fear. It is efficiency. Collisions waste time. Time is not abundant. People move with the assumption that others will do the same. This mutual expectation keeps motion smooth. The street functions because everyone remembers how it functions. Memory operates quietly in the background. A person knows where the paving stone dips without looking. Another knows which doorway opens outward. Someone pauses automatically where a cart usually passes even if no cart is visible today. These behaviors look like intuition, but they are trained responses. The city has rehearsed them into its residents. No one teaches these habits formally. They are absorbed through exposure. Living here long enough rewires movement. The body learns roots before the mind acknowledges them. This produces a calm confidence. People move without scanning constantly. The street feels predictable. Predictability reduces tension. There is light irony in this arrangement. A city that once celebrated conquest and expansion now relies on avoidance and accommodation to function smoothly. The shift is not announced, it simply happens. Power once expressed through dominance now expresses itself through restraint. Adults carry objects through these streets carefully. Baskets are angled, loads are balanced inward, nothing swings widely. Swinging would risk contact. Contact would require reaction. Reaction would slow everything down. The city prefers continuity to assertion. Even arguments adjust to this spatial logic. Disagreements happen close to walls. Voices lower automatically. Gestures shrink. There is nowhere to perform anger dramatically. The street absorbs emotion by limiting its expression. Escalation becomes impractical. Most conflicts end not because they are resolved, but because they are inconvenient to continue. Children observe this as well. They see how adults argue briefly and then stop. Not because they agree, but because the space does not support prolonged conflict. This becomes part of their understanding of interaction. Dispute exists, but it remains contained. Excess emotion feels out of place. Over time, the city begins to operate almost entirely on this shared memory. No signs instruct where to walk. No barriers separate functions. People know where to stand because they have stood there before. They know when to wait because waiting has worked previously. The past organizes the present quietly. This collective memory replaces planning. Planning would require anticipation of change. Change is minimal here. The environment remains stable enough that memory remains accurate. A route learned in childhood still works decades later. This continuity reinforces trust in experience. Experience becomes the primary guide. The streets thus become a kind of archive, not written but lived. Every movement deposits knowledge. Every successful avoidance reinforces a pattern. The city does not record this information anywhere else. It relies on bodies to remember it. This makes the system fragile in theory, but resilient in practice. As long as people continue to live here, the memory persists. Visitors notice this immediately. They pause more often. They hesitate at intersections. They look for cues that do not exist. Locals adjust around them gently. They widen their steps slightly. They wait a moment longer. The system accommodates unfamiliarity without complaint. Memory does not exclude newcomers, it absorbs them gradually. Children growing up here rarely think about the street consciously. They simply know how to move. The knowledge becomes visible only when they leave and realize other places require different habits. Here the street has taught them how to exist among others without collision. That lesson travels with them. There is subtle humor in how efficient this has become. A city with no intention of growing has perfected the art of not getting in its own way. It has eliminated unnecessary friction, not through innovation, but through repetition. The result looks effortless. It is not. It is practiced. As evening approaches, the corners grow quieter. Children drift inside. Adults slow further. The street compresses activity inward. Memory continues to guide movement even in lower light. People know where to place their feet without seeing clearly. The body remembers what the eyes cannot. The city now operates less like a machine and more like a habit. Habits persist without supervision. They function until something interrupts them. Nothing here is interested in interruption. Stability depends on continuity. Continuity depends on memory. In this neighborhood, movement has become a shared language spoken without words. Everyone understands it because everyone learned it the same way. By watching, by repeating, by avoiding collision before it happens. The streets no longer need more people. They need only those who remember how to move within them. Shops that sold the same things. An economy that chose to remain small. The small shops in this neighborhood do not compete for attention. They do not announce themselves loudly or promise improvement. Their doors open because it is time to open them. Their shutters close because the day has moved far enough along. Nothing here suggests urgency. Commerce has learned how to exist without ambition. A bakery sits where it has always sat. The stone around its entrance is worn smooth by feet that know exactly where to stand. The smell inside is familiar before it becomes noticeable. Bread here does not surprise anyone. It is not meant to. The baker does not experiment with new shapes or flavors. He repeats what works because repetition reduces waste. Waste would imply excess. Excess would imply growth. Growth is not required. Customers arrive without deciding to do so. Their bodies carry them here automatically. There is no moment of choice dramatic enough to remember. The baker does not greet them enthusiastically. Recognition is sufficient. Everyone already knows what will be purchased. Words are exchanged only to confirm quantity. The transaction ends quickly not because it is rushed, but because it is complete. Across the street, a small shop sells wine in containers that have been reused so many times they have lost any sense of novelty. The owner measures carefully without appearing to. Precision has become habit. There is no upselling. There is no suggestion that more would be better. Enough is enough. Anything beyond that becomes inconvenient to carry. These shops do not advertise. Advertising would suggest uncertainty. Uncertainty would suggest competition. Competition would suggest expansion. None of this fits here. The customer base is stable. Everyone who needs these goods already knows where to find them. Convincing anyone else would require effort. Effort is reserved for survival, not persuasion. Goods do not change much from year to year. Inventory remains narrow. Variety would complicate storage. Storage would require space. Space is not available. The city has already filled itself. Shops adapt by limiting choice rather than expanding it. This limitation feels deliberate even when it is simply practical. The economy here operates on recognition rather than novelty. People buy from those they know. Trust is established through repetition rather than branding. A product that has not failed before is considered reliable. Reliability matters more than improvement. Improvement risks disappointment. There is quiet humor in how unimpressed these shops are by their own role. They do not imagine themselves as engines of prosperity. They are points of exchange. They provide what is needed and then step back. Their success is measured by continuity, not growth. Prices remain steady because no one has reason to change them. Demand is predictable. Supply is constrained by routine. There is little room for fluctuation. When prices do shift, it is discussed briefly and accepted without protest. Protest would require alternatives. Alternatives are limited. The shopkeepers themselves do not dream of expansion. Owning another location would divide attention. Attention is already stretched thin enough. One shop is manageable. Two would introduce risk. Risk is tolerated only when necessary. Here it is not necessary. Work days follow familiar rhythms. Morning preparation, midday exchange, evening closure, no dramatic peaks, no sudden surges. The day unfolds at a pace that matches the body. This alignment reduces fatigue. A tired shopkeeper makes mistakes. Mistakes cost resources. Resources are finite. Transactions are small but frequent. No single sale matters greatly. Together they sustain life. This creates a strange sense of calm. Losing one customer would not ruin the shop. Gaining one would not transform it. Stability replaces excitement. Excitement has been found unreliable. There is also a subtle social function at work. These shops serve as quiet meeting points. Not places to gather, but places to cross paths. A nod, a brief exchange, recognition without obligation. The economy here reinforces social familiarity without demanding intimacy. The absence of growth does not feel like stagnation to those inside it. It feels like balance. Shops that remain small avoid the pressure to optimize endlessly. They optimize once and then stop. This produces a sustainable equilibrium that resists collapse precisely because it avoids expansion. Merchandise is handled carefully. Nothing is displayed dramatically. Items are placed where they belong and left there. The shop does not rearrange itself to entice. Enticement implies desire for change. Change is not a priority. Even theft is rare, not because morality is enforced, but because familiarity discourages it. Everyone knows who belongs here. Everyone is recognized. Anonymity is limited. The cost of disruption outweighs the benefit. The system polices itself quietly. At the end of the day, shutters close without ceremony. Goods are secured in the same way they were yesterday. Nothing dramatic marks the conclusion of commerce. The economy rests when the people do. There is no expectation that it should operate beyond human capacity. This approach shapes how people think about money. It becomes a tool rather than a measure of worth. Accumulation is possible but unnecessary. Possession beyond use creates burden. Burden demands management. Management demands time. Time is better spent maintaining what already works. There is irony in how resilient this small economy proves to be. Larger systems depend on constant expansion to survive. This one survives by refusing to expand. Its strength lies in its limits. By knowing exactly what it is, it avoids the risk of becoming something else. Visitors might mistake this for poverty. They might assume lack where there is restraint. The residents do not correct them. Explanation would require justification. Justification is unnecessary when needs are met. In this neighborhood, shops do not chase growth. They wait, they open, they sell, they close. Day after day, this pattern holds. It does not impress. It does not inspire stories of triumph. It supports life quietly. An economy that does not need to develop learns how to endure. Endurance is less visible than success, but far more reliable. These small shops understand that deeply. They sell the same things. They remain where they are. And in doing so, they keep the neighborhood alive without asking it to become anything else. Prices that refused to hurry. Money inside a city that had already decided enough. After the shops learned how to remain small, they learned something even more demanding. They learned how to keep prices still, not frozen exactly, but tired. Prices here do not chase opportunity. They linger where they have been for a long time. They move only when forced, and even then with reluctance. Money in this neighborhood does not rush. It waits. A loaf of bread costs roughly what it cost before, not because anyone decreed it so, but because no one sees a reason to change it. The baker knows how much grain arrives. The buyer knows how much bread is needed. Neither imagines a sudden windfall. Profit exists only as a margin wide enough to continue tomorrow. Anything beyond that would require adjustment. Adjustment would disrupt balance. Balance is valued more than gain. People do not discuss prices loudly. They accept them quietly. Acceptance here does not mean enthusiasm. It means familiarity. When a price stays the same long enough, it stops being information and becomes background. No one remembers the exact number anymore. They simply know whether something is affordable or not. This simplicity reduces anxiety. Anxiety thrives on fluctuation. There is a subtle exhaustion in how money behaves here. Coins pass from hand to hand without ceremony. They do not sparkle with promise. They do not suggest transformation. They confirm routine. A purchase is made and immediately forgotten. Memory is reserved for things that change. Money does not change much, so it does not stay in the mind. No one in this neighborhood expects to become wealthy quickly. The idea sounds impractical. Wealth would require accumulation. Accumulation would require storage. Storage would require space. Space is already accounted for. The city has closed that conversation. People aim instead for sufficiency. Sufficiency is achievable. Sufficiency allows sleep. Work produces income that matches effort closely. This discourages fantasy. Labor is not imagined as a path to reinvention. It is a means of staying in place. Staying in place has become a respected outcome. Movement upward feels unnecessary when sideways movement is stable. There is mild humor in how calmly people handle money. A sudden increase in earnings would create more problems than joy. More money invites more decisions. Decisions demand attention. Attention is limited. The city prefers predictability to possibility. Possibility creates noise. Prices reflect this preference. They rise slowly when they must. When supplies tighten a little, the price adjusts a little. No one panics. Panic would imply urgency. Urgency would suggest alternatives. Alternatives are scarce. Everyone knows this. Acceptance follows. People plan their days without consulting currency constantly. They know what they can afford because it has not changed. This frees mental space. The mind is not occupied by calculation. It moves on to other things like timing meals or avoiding crowded streets. Money becomes invisible enough to stop interfering with daily rhythm. This stability creates an odd form of trust. Not trust in institutions or authorities, but trust in repetition. When a system repeats long enough, it earns confidence by default. Even when it is imperfect, it is predictable. Predictability is valuable. There is also a shared understanding of limits. No one expects generosity beyond what the system can support. Gifts are small. Favors are practical. Debt exists, but it is contained. No one borrows expecting escape. Borrowing serves continuity, not ambition. The absence of rapid wealth accumulation reduces envy. Differences remain, but they feel fixed. Fixed differences lose their sting. When someone has more, it is understood to be the result of long habit rather than sudden fortune. Habit is respected. Fortune is distrusted. People do not measure success by income growth. They measure it by stability. A household that survives without crisis is considered successful. A shop that closes on time every night is considered prosperous. These standards are modest, but durable. The irony is difficult to miss. A city once fueled by conquest now measures success by stillness. Money once flowed outward to fund expansion. Now it circulates locally to maintain balance. The economy has turned inward without collapsing. This inward turn has proven sustainable. When prices do change, it is discussed briefly and then absorbed. Complaints are rare. Complaining would imply belief in improvement. Improvement is not part of the expectation. The city has learned how to live with what it has rather than chase what it might have. There is even a rhythm to spending. Certain days feel heavier, certain moments lighter. These patterns repeat so reliably, they become part of timekeeping. Money marks the passage of days without announcing it. It reinforces routine rather than disrupting it. People carry coins with the assumption that they will be used soon. Hoarding feels pointless. Saved money does not promise opportunity. It promises caution. Caution is useful but not exciting. Most people prefer circulation to accumulation. This creates a gentle economy of enough. Enough food, enough warmth, enough coin to replace what breaks. The system does not reward risk. It rewards consistency. Those who behave predictably are supported. Those who gamble find little advantage. There is also a quiet social contract embedded in these prices. Everyone understands the margins are thin. No one pushes them unnecessarily. Bargaining is rare. Pressing for lower prices would threaten continuity. Continuity benefits everyone. The city has thus redefined wealth as endurance. Endurance is harder to measure but easier to recognize. A household that remains intact year after year has succeeded. A shop that still opens at dawn has succeeded. Money serves these outcomes rather than defining them. At the end of the day, prices recede into the background again. Coins are counted. Goods are stored. The numbers involved do not provoke thought. They simply close the loop. Tomorrow will likely require the same amount. That knowledge brings calm. There is subtle humor in how unimpressed this economy is by its own survival. It does not congratulate itself. It does not boast. It continues because continuing works. Growth would introduce fragility. Stillness reduces it. In this neighborhood, money has learned how to behave modestly. It does not inspire dreams. It supports habits. It does not promise escape. It enables repetition. Repetition keeps the city alive without forcing it to become something else. After the shops learned to sell the same things, the prices learned to stay put. And in that stillness, the economy found a strange strength. Not the strength of expansion, but the strength of refusal. Refusal to hurry. Refusal to imagine more. Refusal to collapse under the weight of possibility. Meals that did not try to impress. Eating after expectation. Learn to sit down. By the time the day reaches its quieter middle, the neighborhood has already decided what lunch will be, not by discussion, not by choice, by memory. Food here does not arrive as a question. It arrives as confirmation. The body recognizes the hour before the mind does and prepares itself accordingly. Hunger appears without drama. It is familiar. It does not demand creativity. Meals in this part of the city are simple and repeated. The same combinations appear again and again. Bread that tastes exactly as it should. Vegetables prepared in ways that require no explanation. A small portion of something warm when available. Nothing arrives with ceremony. Nothing needs introduction. Food here is not an event. It is a function that continues life without interrupting it. This is not scarcity in the dramatic sense. No one is counting crumbs or staring at empty bowls with despair. There is enough. Enough has become the guiding principle. Enough calories, enough salt, enough warmth to feel finished. What is absent is abundance. Abundance would complicate things. Abundance creates expectation. Expectation asks questions. Questions are tiring. The repetition of meals brings a particular calm. When the flavor is known in advance, the mind relaxes. There is no need to evaluate, no decision to make. Eating becomes mechanical in the best way. The hands move, the mouth accepts, the body receives what it needs and signals completion without negotiation. There is light humor in how unimpressed everyone is by their own food. No one pauses to comment on taste. Praise would suggest surprise. Surprise would imply variation. Variation is rare. The meal succeeds by being predictable. Predictability is treated as competence. People eat where they are, in doorways, on low stools, standing briefly before returning to work. Lunch does not rearrange the day. It fits into it. There is no extended pause, no collective gathering that might turn eating into social performance. Conversation during meals is minimal. Chewing does not invite philosophy. The absence of variety does something subtle to memory. When meals are repeated often enough, they stop being remembered individually. No one recalls what they ate yesterday. Yesterday tasted like today. This blurring removes attachment. When food does not stand out, it does not demand reflection. Reflection is reserved for things that change. Children accept this without resistance. They grow up with these flavors and learn early that food is not a source of entertainment. It is support. Support is appreciated but not celebrated. A child who asks for something different is gently ignored, not out of cruelty but out of realism. Different is not scheduled. The city has learned that feeding people does not require impressing them. It requires consistency. A meal that appears reliably becomes trusted. Trust replaces desire. Desire fades when it is not fed. The neighborhood understands this instinctively. It does not stimulate appetite beyond necessity. There is also a physical practicality to these meals. Ingredients are chosen because they are available nearby. Transporting food from far away introduces risk. Risk invites loss. Loss would require explanation. Keeping meals local reduces uncertainty. The city prefers reduction. Eating happens at a pace that matches digestion. No one rushes, no one lingers. The body sets the tempo. When the body signals enough, the meal ends. There is no second course waiting to persuade. Persuasion is unnecessary. This approach creates a gentle discipline. People learn how to stop when the need is met. Over time, this carries into other areas of life. Consumption becomes measured. Excess feels uncomfortable rather than desirable. The meal teaches restraint without instruction. There is irony in how this simplicity feels luxurious in its own way. Not luxurious because it is rare, but because it is dependable. A dependable meal reduces anxiety. When hunger is predictable, it loses its edge. The body trusts the schedule. No one speaks of recipes with pride. Pride would suggest authorship. These meals have no author. They are inherited. Adjusted slightly over generations but never reinvented. Reinvention would require optimism about improvement. Improvement is not expected. Utensils are plain, bowls show wear. Nothing matches perfectly, no one notices. Eating is not a visual experience here. It is tactile. The weight of the bowl, the warmth of food. These sensations are enough. The middle of the day passes quietly because lunch does not interrupt it. People resume their tasks without needing recovery time. Heavy meals would slow movement. Light meals preserve energy. The city has optimized for continuation rather than indulgence. There is a faint humor in how seriously this system takes itself without announcing it. A city that once hosted banquets now feeds itself with restraint, not because it cannot do otherwise, but because it chooses not to. Choice has narrowed. That narrowing feels intentional even when it is simply practical. Visitors might interpret this as dullness. They might assume something is missing. Residents do not correct them. Correction would require justification. Justification would imply doubt. Doubt is not present. Meals like this teach a quiet lesson. Satisfaction does not require excitement. It requires adequacy delivered reliably. The body understands this faster than the mind. Over time, the mind follows. After eating, people feel neither elevated nor disappointed. They feel neutral. Neutrality becomes the goal. Neutrality allows work to continue without friction. Emotional highs would distract. Emotional lows would drain. The meal aims for balance. This balance shows itself in posture. People stand easily after eating. They move without heaviness. The city flows again without pause. Lunch disappears into the day, as if it never happened. That is its success. The repetition also creates continuity across generations. A child eating the same meal their parents ate at the same hour absorbs a sense of belonging. The city feeds identity quietly through routine. Identity becomes stable without explanation. As the day moves on, the taste of lunch fades quickly. No lingering desire remains. No craving returns unexpectedly. The body has been satisfied just enough. Just enough proves to be sufficient. There is no nostalgia attached to these meals. Nostalgia requires contrast. Contrast requires change. Change is limited. Without contrast, memory softens. Meals become part of the background texture of life rather than milestones. In a city that has stopped expanding, even appetite has learned restraint. Hunger arrives. It is answered. It leaves. No story is made of it. No lesson is drawn. This is how lunch works here. It does not elevate. It does not disappoint. It supports the body and steps aside. Expectations have been lowered gently over time until they fit the meal exactly. By choosing repetition over novelty, the neighborhood has found a quiet stability. The meal does not promise pleasure. It promises continuity. Continuity turns out to be nourishing in ways abundance never was. When the bowls are set aside and hands are wiped clean, the city continues without marking the transition. Lunch has done its work and vanished. That is all it was ever meant to do. Eating to continue the day. When lunch stopped leaving a trace. After prices learned how to remain still and money learned how to behave modestly, something else followed naturally. Lunch changed its purpose. It stopped trying to be remembered. In this neighborhood, eating no longer served as a marker of the day. It served as a bridge, a brief crossing that allowed the morning to continue into the afternoon without interruption. The meal did not claim space in memory. It cleared space instead. Money had already decided enough. Prices had settled into habits. That calm spread outward and reached the table. When cost stops fluctuating, appetite stops negotiating. People eat what fits the price they already expect. There is no mental arithmetic during the meal, no calculation of value or comparison with yesterday. The meal arrives already approved. Lunch here is not prepared with attention. Attention would suggest importance. Importance would suggest meaning. Meaning would invite memory. Memory would demand contrast. Contrast is scarce. The city does not produce it easily. The meal therefore remains plain. Plainness keeps it quiet. People eat to continue the day, not to celebrate it, not to pause it. The body receives energy and immediately asks to move again. There is no invitation to linger. The food is warm enough to be satisfying, but not indulgent. Indulgence would slow the body. A slow body would resist returning to routine. Routine is valued. This approach removes narrative from eating. There is no story attached to lunch. No one recounts what they ate later. No one looks forward to it in the morning. Anticipation would create expectation. Expectation would create disappointment. Disappointment would require discussion. Discussion would waste time. The absence of a story is deliberate, even if no one names it as such. A meal without a story leaves no emotional residue. It does not follow the eater into the next hours. It disappears cleanly. That disappearance is its success. People eat where they stand or sit briefly. The location does not matter. A doorway, a step, a low surface that happens to be free. The city does not rearrange itself around lunch. Lunch adapts to the city instead. This keeps the day intact. Money supports this quietly. Because prices are stable, portions are predictable. There is no temptation to overeat when abundance is not advertised. There is no fear of scarcity when supply has proven reliable. The meal exists in balance with cost. That balance calms the mind. Conversation during lunch is minimal. Mouths are occupied. Minds are resting. Speech would introduce topics. Topics would linger. Linger would delay return. The city prefers movement to reflection at this hour. Reflection belongs to quieter times. There is gentle irony in how efficiently this works. A city that once measured itself through spectacle now organizes its meals to avoid notice. Eating becomes a private mechanical act performed in public spaces. No one watches. No one performs. Children learn this early. They do not ask what lunch will be. They know it will be something familiar. Familiarity lowers resistance. The child eats without complaint and moves on. The lesson is absorbed without instruction. Food is fuel. Fuel is not entertainment. This does not mean pleasure is absent. Pleasure simply does not insist on being named. A warm bite on a cooler day. A familiar texture that reassures the body. These moments exist, but they are not recorded. Recording would inflate them. Inflation would distort purpose. The stability of prices makes this possible. When money behaves predictably, the meal does not need to compensate emotionally. In places where prices rise unpredictably, meals often carry anxiety. Here they do not. Anxiety has been priced out. People finish eating without ceremony. Bowls are rinsed. Hands are wiped. Nothing signals completion beyond the body standing up. The day resumes where it left off. There is no transitional pause to mark the shift. The morning does not end. It simply extends. This continuity shapes how time is felt. Hours blur slightly. Without a dramatic lunch break, the day becomes smoother. Edges soften. The body moves through tasks without resetting emotionally. This reduces fatigue. Fatigue often comes from transitions more than effort. Money reinforces this rhythm by remaining invisible. When cost is stable, it stops demanding attention. Attention is freed for movement and coordination. The city runs on freed attention. There is a faint humor in how seriously no one takes lunch. Visitors might find it dull. They might expect a pause, a gathering, something to remember. They will not find it. The city does not apologize. It has already decided that lunch is not the main event. Even hunger behaves differently here. It arrives gently. It is answered promptly. It leaves without protest. There is no build-up dramatic enough to demand special treatment. The body trusts the system. Trust reduces intensity. The meal also respects work. It does not interrupt labor with excess heaviness. People return to tasks without stiffness. The body remains cooperative. This cooperation keeps the afternoon productive without forcing it. The absence of surprise is central. Surprise would pull attention backward. People would think about what they ate. They might compare. They might want more or different next time. Desire would awaken. Desire is noisy. Noise is avoided. This logic mirrors the behavior of prices exactly. Prices that refuse to hurry teach appetite to slow down. When nothing promises improvement, there is no reason to desire it. Satisfaction becomes quiet and sufficient. Meals, therefore, become forgettable by design. Forgettable things are easy to live with. They do not accumulate. They do not compete for space in the mind. The city understands accumulation as a risk. Risk has been minimized across systems. There is also an economic clarity here. Food costs what it costs and provides what it provides. There is no attempt to add symbolic value, no presentation meant to justify price. The price already makes sense because it has always made sense. Eating to continue the day produces a particular calm in the afternoon. People do not feel rewarded or deprived. They feel steady. Steadiness supports coordination. Coordination supports community. The system reinforces itself quietly. The city has thus aligned money and appetite. Both operate within known limits. Both resist escalation. Both disappear when their function is complete. This alignment reduces friction across the day. At times, someone might wish for something different. The thought passes quickly. Acting on it would require effort and negotiation. Negotiation would disturb balance. Balance wins. By the time afternoon light shifts, the lunch has already vanished from awareness. No trace remains. No memory demands recall. The body carries energy forward without dragging emotion behind it. This is how lunch works when stability becomes the priority. Eat to continue. Eat to remain. Eat and let the day proceed unchanged. Prices that refused to hurry taught the city patience. Lunch that leaves no story taught it how to move on. Work that knew when to stop. Labor inside a city that had grown tired. Work in this neighborhood no longer tries to prove anything. It no longer competes with memory or ambition. It exists quietly, almost apologetically, as if aware that its purpose has narrowed. People still work. They always have. What has changed is the reason they give themselves for doing it. Most labor here is small and familiar. Hands repeat motions they have repeated for years. Not because the work is inspiring, but because it is known. Familiar movements demand less attention. Attention has become a limited resource. The city spends it carefully. Crafts continue at a modest scale. A person shapes the same object in the same way each day. There is no pressure to improve technique dramatically. Improvement would require time and risk. Risk might fail. Failure would attract notice. Notice would require explanation. The work prefers to remain unnoticed. Production matches need closely. There is no surplus waiting for a market that no longer exists. Goods are made to be used nearby. When demand is met, the hands slow naturally. No one pushes them to continue. Pushing would imply purpose beyond maintenance. Maintenance is sufficient. Workers measure success quietly. A day without error. A tool that does not break. A customer who returns tomorrow. These are small metrics but reliable. Large achievements feel unrealistic. Realism has replaced aspiration. There is a mild irony in how seriously this work takes its own limitations. A city that once built at scale now values restraint as skill. Knowing when to stop becomes part of craftsmanship. Overworking produces waste. Waste produces repair. Repair costs time. Time is better spent resting. Labor here protects the body. Tasks are adjusted to avoid exhaustion. No one boasts about working until collapse. Collapse would remove them from routine. Routine depends on presence. Presence matters more than productivity. Social position is maintained through work rather than advanced by it. People labor enough to remain visible and useful. Visibility prevents suspicion. Usefulness secures belonging. There is little incentive to exceed this balance. Exceeding it might unsettle expectations. The rhythm of work aligns with daylight and energy rather than profit. When the body signals fatigue tasks, pause. Pausing does not require permission. Everyone recognizes the signal. The city has learned that tired hands produce mistakes. Mistakes disrupt stability. Tools show wear openly. They are repaired rather than replaced. Replacement would suggest growth. Growth would require explanation. Repair fits the mood of the city better. A repaired tool continues the story without introducing a new chapter. There is little hierarchy in these tasks. Expertise exists, but it does not dominate. Those who know more simply work more smoothly. They are respected but not elevated dramatically. Dramatic elevation would separate them from the rhythm. Rhythm matters. Workspaces are modest. Benches are worn. Surfaces are uneven. No one adjusts them unless necessary. Necessary is defined narrowly. Comfort is allowed only if it supports endurance. Luxury would distract. Conversation during work is sparse. Talking requires breath and attention. Breathing is reserved for effort. When words are exchanged, they are practical, a reminder, a confirmation. Silence does not feel awkward, it feels efficient. The absence of expansion removes urgency. There is no deadline tied to growth. No quota meant to impress someone elsewhere. The city works for itself now. This inward focus simplifies labor. Tasks begin and end within the same place. Nothing is shipped far away. There is humor in how quietly proud workers are of their steadiness. They do not announce it. They demonstrate it by showing up again tomorrow. Showing up becomes the achievement. Young people learn trades not to rise but to remain. Learning is practical. No one promises transformation. Skills are passed on because they are needed, not because they lead somewhere new. This honesty reduces disappointment. The afternoon light changes and work slows naturally. No bell announces the shift. Bodies recognize it. The hands pause. Tools are set down carefully. Careful placement suggests intention to return. Return is expected. Work does not consume identity here. It occupies part of the day and then releases it. People do not introduce themselves by their labor. Labor is assumed. Identity forms elsewhere in routine and presence. The city has learned that continuous effort without ambition is sustainable. Ambition burns quickly. Sustainability lasts. The difference becomes clear over time. There is a faint irony in how this tired city produces such durable work habits. By refusing to chase progress, it has protected its capacity to continue. Work here is not heroic. It is dependable. As evening approaches, workers clean their spaces without ceremony, not to impress, to prepare for tomorrow. Tomorrow will look much like today. This predictability removes anxiety. Anxiety interferes with rest. Rest matters because work depends on it. This understanding has settled into the culture. A rested worker is valued more than a driven one. Drive consumes, rest preserves. In this neighborhood, labor has learned restraint. It does not attempt to redefine the city. It supports it quietly. The hands do just enough and then stop. A city that has grown tired does not stop working. It stops pushing. And in that stopping, it finds a rhythm that lasts longer than ambition ever could. Rest that was not considered. Failure. Time inside a city that learned to pause. After work learned when to stop, something else adjusted quietly alongside it. Rest changed its meaning. In this neighborhood, stopping early did not signal weakness. It signaled awareness. The city had reached a point where exhaustion no longer proved commitment. Endurance did. The workday here does not end at a fixed hour. It fades. Tasks slow when the body does. Hands linger a moment longer on tools and then let go. No one watches the sun to measure productivity. The sun watches the people instead. When heat presses too firmly, or light softens enough, the city understands the message without debate. Weather is allowed to influence effort openly. A hot afternoon shortens labor without apology. A cool morning invites a bit more movement. No rule enforces this. The body negotiates directly with the day. This negotiation is trusted. Trust replaces schedules. There is quiet relief in this arrangement. People do not pretend to have equal strength every day. Strength fluctuates. A city that acknowledges this avoids unnecessary strain. Strain accumulates silently and eventually demands payment. This neighborhood prefers to pay less. Stopping early does not attract comment. No one raises an eyebrow. No one records the moment. Leaving work before full daylight fades is not interpreted as laziness. It is interpreted as accuracy. The body has spoken clearly enough. This accuracy becomes a shared value. A person who rests when tired is seen as reliable. They are likely to return tomorrow intact. A person who pushes past fatigue may fail unpredictably. Predictability matters more than heroics. There is mild humor in how completely this reverses older ideas of labor. Once a long day was a badge of honor. Here it is a sign of poor planning or stubbornness. The city has little patience for either. Rest integrates itself into the rhythm of life rather than opposing it. It is not treated as reward. It is treated as maintenance. Maintenance keeps systems running quietly. Neglect makes noise. People sit when the day invites sitting. A step becomes a bench. A wall becomes support. There is no ceremony. Rest does not need to be earned through suffering. It is taken because it is available. Conversation during rest is light or absent. Silence feels appropriate. The body recovers more efficiently without narration. Words would stir thought. Thought would delay recovery. The city values recovery. Children absorb this logic without instruction. They see adults pause without guilt. They learn that stopping is not shameful. It is strategic. This lesson settles deeply and shapes future behavior. The flexibility of rest also reduces comparison. When no one works the same hours, no one competes. Competition fades. Cooperation remains. People cover for one another naturally. If someone rests today, another will work tomorrow. Balance emerges without management. This shared understanding prevents resentment. There is no sense that someone else is doing less unfairly. Doing less is sometimes necessary. The city has accepted this truth. There is irony in how productive this makes the neighborhood overall. By allowing rest early, the city avoids collapse later. Work continues across seasons without dramatic interruption. This continuity appears modest but proves durable. Even the soundscape reflects this shift. The neighborhood grows quiet earlier in the day, not abruptly, gradually. Activity recedes like a tide rather than shutting off. This gentle transition prepares the body for evening without shock. Rest is not confined indoors. People pause wherever they are. Shade is used intelligently. Breezes are appreciated rather than ignored. The city works with conditions instead of against them. No one romanticizes exhaustion here. Exhaustion is treated as information. Information is respected. Ignoring it would be irresponsible. The absence of rigid hours also blurs the boundary between work and rest. Tasks resume briefly if energy returns. They pause again if it does not. This fluidity removes pressure. Pressure shortens patience. Patience has become essential. There is quiet satisfaction in how naturally this operates. No authority enforces it. No announcement explains it. It simply works because everyone understands the cost of ignoring limits. The humor remains understated. A person leaving early might remark that the city will still be there tomorrow. The statement is obvious and yet comforting. The city has outlasted much harder days. This attitude shapes evening behavior as well. People arrive home with energy remaining. They are not emptied by labor. They can eat without heaviness. They can sit without collapse. The evening becomes livable rather than merely survivable. Rest also preserves mood. Irritation fades faster when fatigue is not extreme. Conflicts do not escalate easily. A rested person argues less intensely. The city becomes calmer, not through rule, but through energy management. Over time, this approach redefines success. A good day is not the longest day. It is the one that ends without damage. Damage accumulates quietly. Avoiding it becomes a skill. The city has learned to make less effort without disappearing. This is its quiet achievement. It does not expand. It does not impress. It continues. As dusk approaches, people are already partially rested. The transition to night feels smooth. There is no sharp drop from activity to stillness. Stillness has been present all along in small doses. The lights that appear are modest. The streets do not suddenly awaken again. The city does not regret stopping early. Regret would imply belief that more was possible or necessary. That belief has softened. Rest here is not escapism. It is participation in a long rhythm that values duration over intensity. Intensity burns quickly. Duration carries life forward. In this neighborhood, time has been adjusted gently rather than forced. Work knows when to stop. Rest knows when to begin. Neither feels like failure. The city learned how to do less and discovered that less was enough. An afternoon that did not ask for speed. When time learned to loosen. By the time the afternoon arrives, this neighborhood has already made most of its decisions for the day. Nothing dramatic remains to be settled. The city does not rush to fill the remaining hours with activity. It allows them to stretch. Afternoon here is not a transition towards something exciting. It is a settling into what already exists. Light shifts gently along the walls. Old stone receives it without reflection. There is no brightness sharp enough to demand attention. The sun lowers its voice, shadows lengthen but do not dramatize themselves. They move slowly across familiar surfaces that have hosted this movement countless times before. The walls do not react. They have learned patience better than the people. Activity becomes sparse without stopping entirely. Doors open less often, footsteps thin out. The street remains usable but not busy. No one comments on this change. Commenting would imply expectation. Expectation has been reduced over time until it fits the afternoon exactly. People adjust their pace without realizing it. Movements lengthen. Pauses appear between actions. A task that might have been completed quickly in the morning now takes longer, simply because there is no reason to hurry. The city has learned that not everything needs completion today. Work that remains tends to be light. Small adjustments, minor repairs, movements that do not require sustained effort. Anything demanding focus has already been addressed earlier. The afternoon is reserved for what can be interrupted without consequence. This shift feels natural because it repeats daily. Bodies anticipate it. Energy declines gently rather than collapsing. The absence of pressure allows fatigue to remain manageable. The city prefers manageable fatigue. Unmanageable fatigue produces mistakes. Mistakes create noise. People spend more time standing without purpose, leaning against walls, watching nothing in particular. Observation replaces action. Observation here does not lead to insight, it leads to acceptance. The city does not require interpretation in the afternoon. It simply continues. Children appear briefly and then disappear again. Their play softens. Running gives way to sitting. Voices lower. Even energy that once felt limitless adjusts itself to the slower rhythm. No one instructs this change. The afternoon teaches it directly. There is light humor in how seriously the city takes this unwinding. It behaves as if speed would be inappropriate now, as if rushing would disturb something delicate. Nothing delicate is actually present. Only habit. Habit has become powerful enough to regulate motion. Conversations shorten. People exchange fewer words. Silence expands without becoming awkward. The afternoon tolerates silence well. It fills space without demanding explanation. People learn to exist alongside one another without engaging actively. Presence becomes enough. Tasks that require coordination are postponed. Coordination requires attention and energy. Energy is being conserved. The city does not insist on productivity beyond necessity. It has already learned the cost of insisting. There is a sense of waiting, but not for anything specific. People wait for the light to change, for the temperature to soften, for evening to announce itself quietly. Waiting here is not impatience. It is alignment. The city aligns itself with time rather than opposing it. Shops remain open but unambitious. No one rearranges displays. No one calls out to passers-by. The afternoon is not the moment for persuasion. Those who need something will come. Those who do not will pass by slowly. Sound changes character. Voices carry less urgency. Footsteps sound heavier but slower. The city hums rather than speaks. This hum signals continuity rather than action. It reassures without instructing. The absence of new activity becomes noticeable only because it feels appropriate. A city still capable of movement chooses stillness instead. This choice feels deliberate even if no one names it. Deliberation has been replaced by rhythm. There is irony in how restful this feels without being restful at all. People are still awake, still present, still aware, but awareness has softened. The edges of thought blur slightly. The afternoon permits this blurring. Memory behaves differently at this hour. Events do not imprint themselves strongly. The afternoon leaves fewer marks. What happens now is less likely to be remembered later. This suits the city. Not everything needs to be carried forward. Older residents recognize this hour instinctively. They know what can be done now and what should wait. Younger ones learn through observation. The lesson is subtle. Not all time is equal. Some hours are for action. Others are for allowing. The sun continues its slow movement. Light finds corners it did not reach earlier. Then it withdraws again. The walls accept both states without distinction. They have hosted brighter moments. They have hosted darker ones. Afternoon fits comfortably between. People prepare quietly for evening without preparing actively. Meals are thought about but not yet made. Doors remain open but will close soon. The city does not announce this transition. It lets it happen gradually. There is a collective understanding that pushing too hard now would only shorten the evening. The evening matters more than productivity. It offers rest without effort. The afternoon protects it by slowing down early. Humor appears in small observations. Someone notes that nothing urgent has happened all day, and nothing will now. The statement carries no disappointment, only confirmation. The city nods silently. Waiting becomes a shared activity. Not waiting for change, but waiting for continuation. The city does not expect improvement by nightfall. It expects familiarity. Familiarity feels safer than novelty at this hour. Even the air feels different. Warmer where it has lingered against stone. Cooler where shadows have settled. People choose where to stand based on comfort rather than purpose. Comfort becomes a guide. There is no anxiety attached to this slowing. Anxiety requires stakes. Stakes have been lowered. The afternoon exists without demanding resolution. It does not threaten to be wasted. It simply is. As evening approaches, the city is already halfway there. The transition will be gentle because the afternoon prepared it carefully. Nothing abrupt will be required. Nothing will need to be shut down forcefully. The afternoon teaches the city how to wait without impatience, how to be present without urgency, how to let time move without trying to manage it. These lessons are learned daily and never written down. By the time the light softens further, the city has loosened fully. People are ready for night without having rushed toward it. The afternoon has done its work quietly. In this neighborhood, time does not collapse into evening. It eases into it. The afternoon ensures that nothing is carried too tightly forward. It smooths the day until it can be set down without resistance. Nothing important happened. And because of that, everything continues exactly as it should. Voices that spoke briefly. When information stopped asking for reaction, after the afternoon learned how to loosen its grip on time, the city adjusted its voice. Conversation did not disappear. It simply shortened. Words here became functional rather than expressive. People still spoke, but they no longer stretched speech into performance. A sentence finished when its purpose was met. Nothing pushed it further. Voices moved through the streets in fragments. A greeting that confirmed presence. A comment that acknowledged weather without interpretation. A brief exchange of facts that required no response. Conversation behaved like the afternoon itself. It passed through gently and left little behind. No one argued in the late afternoon, not because agreement had been reached, but because argument demanded energy that no longer felt available. Disagreement requires momentum. Momentum requires belief that something should change. The city had already decided that change was not the task of this hour. When people stopped to speak, they did so briefly. Bodies remained angled toward where they were going. Feet stayed ready to move. Conversation was not meant to anchor anyone in place. It existed alongside movement rather than replacing it. Topics stayed close to the surface. Who had been seen earlier? Which shop would close soon? Whether something minor had been repaired. No one searched for meaning in these exchanges. Meaning would have slowed them down. Slowing down had already been accomplished by the afternoon itself. There was quiet humor in how efficiently talk had become unnecessary. A raised eyebrow replaced a sentence. A nod replaced explanation. People who had lived here long enough understood these signals without translation. Language condensed itself to match the energy of the hour. Information still circulated. News still arrived. It simply arrived without urgency. Someone mentioned something that had happened elsewhere. It was noted. It was not discussed. The city did not react visibly. Reaction would have required rearrangement of thought. Rearrangement was not scheduled. News here no longer startled anyone. Surprise requires expectation. Expectation had thinned. Events beyond the neighborhood felt distant, not because they were ignored, but because they no longer demanded response. The city had learned that not every piece of information deserved action. This did not mean people were uninformed. It meant information had changed function. Instead of motivating behavior, it became background. Like the hum of the street or the shift of light on stone, present but not directing movement. People absorbed facts the way they absorbed temperature. Noted, adjusted slightly, moved on. There was no debate about interpretation. Interpretation would have led to conversation. Conversation would have extended. Extension felt unnecessary. There is irony in how calm this made the neighborhood. In other places, news creates agitation. Here it settled quietly into awareness, without disturbing rhythm. The city had learned how to receive information without letting it reorganize life. Stories of larger events circulated without emphasis. Someone might mention a decision made elsewhere. Another might respond with a short acknowledgement. No one speculated about consequences. Speculation creates tension. Tension was being conserved for nothing. The lack of excitement did not come from apathy. It came from calibration. The city had experienced enough change to know that excitement rarely improved outcomes. Calm proved more durable. Children overheard these conversations and learned something subtle. They learned that information does not always demand emotion, that hearing something new does not require reaction. This lesson settled into them early and shaped how they listened. The absence of debate also softened social boundaries. Without arguments, there were fewer sides to choose. People remained neighbors rather than opponents. The city protected itself by reducing the number of things worth disagreeing about. This approach altered how memory worked. News that did not provoke emotion did not embed itself deeply. By evening, most details had faded. Only the sense that something had been mentioned remained. The specifics dissolved. The city did not mind. Information that fades quickly leaves space for rest. Rest was the priority now. Mental rest required fewer sharp impressions. Sharp impressions cut into calm. Calm was being carefully maintained. There was a shared understanding that nothing discussed now needed resolution before nightfall. Resolution could wait, or not arrive at all. The city was comfortable with unresolved information. Unresolved things had become common. This comfort created a particular tone. Voices softened naturally. Even disagreement, when it appeared, was gentle. A statement offered. Another left unchallenged. Silence followed. Silence carried the conversation forward without escalating it. The street itself seemed to encourage this restraint. Narrow space discourages raised voices. Sound travels easily and returns quickly. Loudness becomes uncomfortable. People adjust instinctively. Volume lowers. Emotion follows. The city thus filtered information through architecture and habit. News passed through layers that softened its impact. By the time it reached the body, it had lost its edge. This was not ignorance. It was protection. People did not gather to discuss events collectively. Gathering would have given them weight. Weight would have slowed the day further than intended. The afternoon had already loosened time enough. The humor here was quiet and internal. Someone might remark that nothing interesting ever happens anymore. The remark would carry no bitterness, only observation. The city would accept it without protest. This does not mean nothing happens. It means events are processed differently. Without urgency, they lose the power to dominate attention. Attention remains local. Local life continues uninterrupted. As evening approached, conversations became even shorter. Words gave way to gestures. Presence replaced explanation. The city did not need to explain itself to itself anymore. News completed its journey into irrelevance without conflict. It was heard. It was acknowledged. It was set aside. The day continued unchanged. This process repeated daily until it became invisible. People no longer noticed how little they reacted. Reaction had once felt necessary. Now it felt optional. The city had learned something rare. That information does not always need response. That awareness can exist without movement. That knowing something does not require doing something about it immediately. This lesson aligned perfectly with the afternoon that did not ask for speed. Time loosened. Conversation loosened with it. News softened into background noise. By the time evening arrived, the city was mentally unburdened. No unresolved arguments waited. No urgent facts demanded action. The mind could rest as easily as the body. In this neighborhood, voices did not disappear. They simply learned restraint. Information did not vanish. It learned humility. The city continued not because it ignored the world, but because it refused to let the world hurry it. And that refusal felt calm enough to carry into night. Evening that drew inward, when the city chose quiet over display. Evening does not arrive suddenly in this neighborhood. It does not announce itself with a change of mood or a shift in purpose. It simply settles. Light fades at a pace slow enough that no one feels interrupted. The city does not resist this change. It has learned that resistance would require energy it no longer wishes to spend. Doors begin to close earlier than they once did. Not all at once. Not in response to danger. One door closes because someone has finished for the day. Another because the air has cooled slightly. Another because there is no longer a reason to remain open. The street notices these closures without reacting. It has seen them countless times before. There is no sense of retreat. Closing a door here does not mean withdrawal from the world. It means narrowing focus. The city is not hiding, it is condensing. Activity does not disappear. It moves inward, walls accept it. Rooms receive it. The street releases it gently. Light becomes selective. Fewer lamps are lit. Those that remain are placed carefully. They illuminate only what needs to be seen. Excess brightness would feel intrusive. Shadows are allowed to exist. They are not considered suspicious. They are familiar companions at this hour. The street grows quieter but not empty. Footsteps still pass. They simply pass less often. Voices still appear. They simply do not linger. Sound thins until it becomes a background hum rather than a presence. The city breathes more softly. Private space becomes important again, not because it has been absent, but because it now feels appropriate. During the day, closeness is tolerated. In the evening, it is managed. People prefer to occupy smaller circles. The idea of gathering widely feels unnecessary. Families draw together without planning it. This movement is habitual rather than sentimental. People sit where they usually sit. They stand near those they have always stood near. No one comments on this arrangement. It does not need explanation. It works. There are no large gatherings, not because they are forbidden, but because they feel impractical. Coordinating many bodies would require effort. Effort would disturb the calm the evening offers naturally. The city does not see the value in that disturbance. Meals in the evening are quiet, not elaborate, not hurried. They resemble the meals that came before, but feel slower. Chewing takes more time. Conversation softens. No one is in a hurry to finish. No one is eager to begin something new afterward. The evening does not promise entertainment. There are no spectacles waiting, no performance to attend. The city does not feel deprived by this absence. It has already experienced enough display to know that display exhausts quickly. Children remain close to home. Their energy narrows. Play becomes contained. Laughter lowers in volume. Even joy learns restraint here, not because it is suppressed, but because it adapts to space. The quiet that emerges is not tense. It does not feel enforced. It feels practiced. People have lived this hour many times. Their bodies recognize it and adjust accordingly. Muscles loosen, breathing deepens slightly. The city prepares itself for rest without declaring it. There is subtle irony in how peaceful this feels, given the history embedded in the stone. This city once echoed with ambition and noise. Now it chooses silence not out of fear, but out of familiarity. Silence has proven reliable. Inside homes, activities continue quietly. Small tasks, folding, cleaning, arranging. None of these actions aim at improvement. They aim at readiness. Readiness for tomorrow. Tomorrow will resemble today closely enough to prepare for it easily. Windows glow briefly and then dim. Some rooms remain dark entirely. Darkness is not considered a problem. It is part of the evening structure. Light is used where needed and withheld where not. This efficiency extends to emotion as well. People do not recount the day in detail. There is no formal review. What happened happened. What did not happen does not require explanation. The day is allowed to close without summary. Neighbors do not visit unannounced. Surprise visits would disrupt rhythm. Visits are rare and expected. When they occur, they are brief. People exchange presents rather than news. Presence feels sufficient. The street outside becomes a corridor rather than a destination. Those who pass through do so quietly. Those who remain do not watch them closely. Attention turns inward without being guarded. The city does not fear the dark. Darkness has been here long enough to earn trust. It brings coolness and rest. It does not threaten continuity. Morning will return, whether the city worries about it or not. There is humor in how deliberately undramatic this is. A city that once thrived on attention now finds comfort in being unnoticed. The evening confirms that nothing needs to be proven. As time passes, the remaining sounds soften further, a door closing gently, a step on stone, a voice inside a room speaking briefly and then stopping. These sounds do not accumulate. They fade as they appear. No one stands watch. No one scans the street for trouble. Vigilance would suggest danger. Danger is not expected. The city has grown accustomed to itself. Familiarity reduces suspicion. Even those still awake feel no pressure to remain alert. The evening does not demand readiness. It invites release. Release does not mean sleep immediately. It means loosening grip on the day. The absence of large gatherings also reduces comparison. No one measures their evening against another. Everyone occupies their own small circle. The city fragments gently without isolating itself. This fragmentation protects calm. Large groups amplify emotion. Small ones absorb it. The city prefers absorption. As night deepens, lamps are extinguished one by one, not all at once, not according to rule. Each light leaves when it has served its purpose. Darkness fills the space without rushing. The quiet is not absolute. It never is, but it is sufficient. Sufficient quiet allows thought to slow, allows memory to blur, allows the body to settle. There is no sense that something important is missing. Nothing feels postponed. The evening does not hint at a better version of itself. It is complete as it is. People lie down earlier than they might elsewhere, not because they are tired of living, but because rest has become efficient. Rest restores without drama. Drama is unnecessary. The city contracts fully now. Streets hold only what remains necessary. Homes contain what matters. The rest dissolves into shadow. This inward movement is not regression. It is refinement. The city has learned how to reduce without disappearing. It has learned how to quiet itself without fear. The silence that settles is not imposed. It is chosen again and again through habit. Habit becomes culture. Culture becomes comfort. Even those who remain awake late do so gently. Their thoughts drift rather than sharpen. The city does not encourage analysis at this hour. Analysis would disturb rest. There is a sense of safety that comes not from protection but from predictability. Tonight will be like other nights. Nothing unexpected is waiting. This expectation calms the body more effectively than any guard could. As the last sounds fade, the city holds itself quietly. It does not wait for applause. It does not expect recognition. It simply remains. This is the evening when the city draws inward, not because it must, but because it can, and because it has learned that quiet is not absence. It is presence without pressure. Nothing dramatic concludes the day. The day ends by becoming smaller, and in that smallness the city finds enough. The city does not end the day with a statement. It never learned how to. There is no final sound meant to mark completion, no gesture large enough to separate what has been from what will follow. The neighborhood simply remains. That remaining is its conclusion. Nothing here collapsed. That matters. Collapse would have made noise. It would have demanded memory. It would have forced the city into stories that insist on meaning. This place avoided that fate quietly. It neither failed nor triumphed. It continued. And continuation turns out to be far more difficult than either drama. At no point did the neighborhood decide to stop growing. There was no meeting, no announcement. Growth simply stopped being useful. Streets no longer widened. Houses no longer waited to be replaced. Shops no longer imagined more customers than they could recognize. Ambition did not vanish. It shrank until it fit inside daily life without straining it. This shrinking was not fear, it was calibration. The city learned the exact size it could maintain without exhausting itself. Anything larger would have required effort that did not return value. Anything smaller would have lost function. What remained was balance. Balance is rarely celebrated. It does not photograph well. It does not sound impressive when explained, but it holds. The neighborhood stayed alive by refusing to insist on becoming something else. That refusal was not loud enough to be called resistance. It was quieter than that. It was the decision to repair instead of rebuild, to repeat instead of innovate, to rest instead of push. These choices accumulated slowly until they became character. People here did not wake each day expecting progress. They woke expecting familiarity. Familiarity delivered exactly what it promised. Predictable streets, known faces, work that did not ask too much, meals that did not surprise, evenings that arrived gently. This predictability reduced fear. Fear requires uncertainty. Uncertainty had been reduced. History often prefers moments where everything changes. This neighborhood offers the opposite. Nothing changed enough to deserve a chapter break. And because of that, it survived in a way more dramatic places often did not. There was no single night to remember, no date to circle, no story to tell later that would sound impressive. There was only continuity. Continuity does not inspire monuments, it inspires maintenance. Walls were patched, streets were remembered, prices were kept steady, voices softened. Time slowed. These are not the materials of legend, they are the materials of endurance. The irony is subtle but persistent. A city that once defined itself through expansion learned how to survive by contracting its expectations. Power gave way to restraint. Movement gave way to circulation. Noise gave way to presence. The neighborhood did not disappear because it stopped trying to be seen. Nothing here demanded attention at the end. The day closed the same way it opened. Gradually, without ceremony, doors shut when they needed to. Lights dimmed when their purpose ended. People lay down not because they were defeated, but because rest was available. The absence of a climax is the point. History does not always move in arcs. Sometimes it moves in loops so small they appear flat from a distance. Those loops still carry people forward. They still hold life inside them. They simply do not announce it. This neighborhood did not become a warning or a lesson. It became a place where life adjusted itself downward just enough to remain possible. That adjustment did not erase meaning, it removed excess. If you are still listening now, it is because nothing has asked you to stop. Nothing has startled you awake. The city has done its job by not demanding reaction. It has allowed you to drift alongside it. Before you go any deeper into rest, remember this quietly. History does not always need a turning point to continue. Sometimes it only needs a place willing to stay the same long enough for people to live inside it. The neighborhood did not vanish. It did not rise again. It remained. And that was enough. Now rest.